The ceiling fan in the emergency room spun lazily above me, its rhythmic clicking matching the throb in my freshly cast arm. 3 a.m, and St. Mary's Hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. My scrubs, normally pristine white, were splattered with drops of dried blood. Mine from when I'd fallen. Or rather, when I'd been pushed. "Just a few more forms, Miss Bennett," the night nurse said, sliding a clipboard across the counter. I winced, shifting the heavy plaster cast as I reached for the pen. 6 weeks minimum, the doctor had said. 6 weeks of struggling to change IVs and administer medications one-handed. 6 weeks of explaining to my supervisor why I couldn't handle my full patient load. 6 weeks of hoping my stepfather would be in a better mood when I got home. "Thanks, Lily," I said, recognizing the nurse from previous shifts. I'd been working at St. Mary's for just under a year, my first job after nursing school. Tonight, though, I was on the wrong side of the counter. I scrawled my signature as best I could with my non-dominant hand, trying to ignore the fluorescent lights that intensified my headache. A sudden commotion at the entrance made me turn. The automatic doors hissed open, and the atmosphere in the emergency room shifted instantly. The security guard straightened. The receptionist's phone conversation abruptly ended. Even the crying child in the waiting area fell silent. He entered first, a tall man in a black suit who scanned the room with cold efficiency before stepping aside. Then came another, broader, with hands that looked like they could crush stone. Only then did the third man enter. He moved differently than the others, with a casual, predatory grace that made my heart stutter in my chest. Expensive black coat, tailored suit underneath. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and perfect symmetry. He couldn't have been more than 35. I knew exactly who he was, even though I'd never seen him before. Everyone in the city knew Alexander Russo. "Mr. Russo," the charge nurse gasped, rushing forward. "We weren't expecting you." His voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly soft. "Family emergency." My gaze instinctively dropped to the floor. People like me didn't make eye contact with people like him. The Russo family owned half the city. Officially, they were in real estate and shipping. Unofficially, well, that was something no one discussed aloud. I returned to my paperwork, trying to be invisible. The less attention I attracted, the better. That strategy had worked my entire life, especially at home. "4th floor, VIP suite," I heard the charge nurse say. "Dr. Winters is already waiting." The entourage moved toward the private elevator, and I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. The clicking of expensive shoes on linoleum faded, and the emergency room slowly returned to its normal hum of activity. "You need a ride home, honey?" Lily asked, taking the completed forms. I shook my head. "I'll grab an Uber." "Are you sure that's a good idea? Going home, I mean?" Her eyes flicked meaningfully to my cast. A flush crept up my neck. This wasn't the first time I'd come to the emergency room with an injury, though it was by far the worst. "It's fine. Just clumsy me," I said with a forced smile. Tripped on the stairs. Lily's expression made it clear she didn't believe me, but she nodded anyway. "Call if you need anything." Outside, the night air was crisp with early autumn. I pulled my jacket awkwardly around my shoulders, one sleeve hanging empty over my cast. My phone showed 3:47 a.m. 3 hours until my stepfather left for work. If I timed it right, I could slip into the house and lock myself in my room without seeing him. I opened the rideshare app, then paused. My bank account balance stared back at me. $27.36. The ride would cost nearly half of that, and rent was due next week. "Looks like we're walking," I muttered to myself, pocketing the phone. It wasn't far, 20 minutes on foot through relatively safe neighborhoods. I'd done it before. I was halfway down the block when headlights swept over me from behind. A black SUV with tinted windows slowed to my pace. My pulse quickened, and I walked faster, clutching my bag against my side. The passenger window slid down silently. The stone-handed man from earlier looked out at me. "Miss Bennett," he said, not a question. I froze. "How do you know my name?" Instead of answering, he opened the door and stepped out. "Mr. Russo would like to speak with you." My mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. There must be some mistake. I don't know Mr. Russo. No mistake. He gestured to the open door. "Please." The please didn't sound optional. I glanced around the empty street. No witnesses, no escape route. With shaking legs, I approached the vehicle. The interior was leather and darkness, and there, in the back seat, was Alexander Russo. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming. Not just wealthy and powerful, but dangerous in a way that made my skin prickle with awareness. "Join me," he said, those two simple words carrying the weight of a command. I slid awkwardly into the seat, trying to manage my cast. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that somehow sounded final. "Mila Bennett," he said, studying me with eyes so dark they appeared black in the dim lighting. 24 years old. Graduated nursing school last year. Works in pediatric oncology. Lives with stepfather Ray Donovan at 1842 Westbrook Avenue. My breath caught in my throat. Why were you in the emergency room tonight, Mila?" he interrupted. I fell. The lie came automatically, rehearsed over years. His gaze dropped to my cast, then back to my face. Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "Try again." "It was an accident," I insisted, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward slightly, and I pressed back against the seat. "You've got 3 seconds. Who broke your arm?" The question hung between us, sharp as a blade. I couldn't understand why Alexander Russo, who controlled the city's underworld, was in a car with me, asking about my broken arm. My mind spun with confusion and fear. 1. He counted, his voice soft. "Please, I should go. 2. Something in his tone broke through years of practiced silence. "My stepfather," I blurted out, then immediately regretted it. "But it was an accident. He didn't mean to." Another practiced line. Alexander's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the car seemed to drop. He studied me for a long moment, then pressed a button on the console between us. "Carlo, take us to Miss Bennett's residence." Panic surged through me. "No, please, you can't." He'll what?" Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I fell silent, unable to finish the sentence. Alexander's hand moved toward me, and I flinched instinctively. But he only reached for the blanket folded on the seat beside me, which he carefully draped over my lap. "You're shivering," he noted. I hadn't realized it until he mentioned it. "Why are you doing this? Why me?" He considered the question, or perhaps he was considering how much to reveal. "Your mother was Julia Bennett, correct?" I nodded, surprised. "She died 3 years ago." "I know." Something softened in his expression, just for a moment. "She worked for my father for many years, as his private nurse." This was news to me. My mother had never mentioned working for the Russo family. She'd been a home care nurse for many wealthy clients, but this connection seemed impossible. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked, changing the subject abruptly. The question caught me off guard. "Yesterday. Lunch, I think." Without comment, he reached into a compartment and handed me a protein bar. When I hesitated, he added, "You need to keep up your strength." I accepted it with my good hand, awkwardly trying to unwrap it until he took it back, opened it, and returned it to me. The casual intimacy of the gesture was disorienting. "Thank you," I murmured, taking a small bite. The chocolate and peanut butter tasted like heaven after hours in the hospital. The SUV turned onto my street, and my anxiety returned full force. "Please," I tried one more time. "My shift starts at noon. I should just get some sleep and you won't be working today," Alexander stated flatly, "or tomorrow." "I can't afford to miss shifts," I protested. He gave me a look that silenced further objections. "Your employment situation is being handled." The SUV stopped in front of my small duplex. The porch light was on, meaning my stepfather was awake, waiting. My stomach twisted with dread. "Stay in the car," Alexander instructed, then spoke to his driver. "Carlo, Vince, with me." Before I could object, all 3 men exited the vehicle. I watched through the tinted windows as they approached my house. My stepfather opened the door before they reached it, clearly confused by the expensive vehicle and well-dressed men on his doorstep at 4 a.m. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw my stepfather's expression change from confusion to recognition to fear. Alexander spoke briefly, his posture relaxed but somehow threatening. Then, to my astonishment, my stepfather nodded repeatedly, turned, and went back inside. Alexander and his men followed. 5 excruciating minutes passed. I contemplated running but had nowhere to go. Finally, the front door opened again. The 2 guards emerged first, followed by Alexander. My stepfather didn't reappear. When Alexander returned to the SUV, he carried a small duffel bag. He placed it on the seat between us. "Your essentials," he explained. "Clothes, toiletries, medication. Is there anything else you need from the house?" I stared at him in disbelief. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing he didn't deserve," Alexander replied coolly. "Your stepfather and I had a conversation about respect and consequences. He's packing for a trip." A chill ran down my spine. "A trip?" "A long one." Alexander's phone chimed, and he checked it briefly. "We need to go." "Go where?" "I can't just—" "Mila," he interrupted, his tone gentler than before. "You have 2 options. Return to that house and wait for the next accident, possibly one you won't walk away from. Or come with me, where I guarantee your safety." "Why would you protect me?" I whispered. "You don't even know me." His eyes held mine, intense and unreadable. "I made a promise to your mother before she died. I intend to keep it." The revelation stunned me into silence. My mother had never mentioned the Russos, never hinted at any connection to the city's most notorious family. What other secrets had she kept? As the SUV pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of my stepfather through the front window, packing frantically, occasionally glancing outside with naked fear on his face. For the first time since my mother's death, I felt a glimmer of something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. "Where are we going?" I asked, watching my prison of 3 years disappear behind us. Alexander's reply was simple: home. What I didn't realize then was that I was trading one cage for another. Perhaps a gilded one, but a cage nonetheless, and its keeper was infinitely more dangerous than the man I was leaving behind. Dawn was breaking as the SUV pulled through wrought iron gates, casting long shadows across manicured lawns. I dozed off somewhere along the journey, my exhaustion finally overcoming anxiety. When I blinked awake, we were winding up a long driveway toward what could only be described as a mansion. A sprawling stone structure that looked like it belonged in the European countryside rather than the outskirts of our city. "We're here," Alexander said, watching me take in the estate through sleep-blurred eyes. The vehicle stopped at the entrance, where a woman in a crisp black suit waited. She opened my door before Carlo could exit the driver's seat. "Welcome, Miss Bennett," she said with a slight accent, Eastern European perhaps. "I'm Irina, the house manager." Alexander emerged from his side. "Irina will show you to your room. Get some rest. We'll talk later." Before I could respond, he was already walking away, taking a call on one of his phones. The 2 guards followed several paces behind, silent shadows to his commanding presence. "This way, please." Irina gestured toward the imposing double doors. I clutched my duffel bag awkwardly against my chest, feeling small and disheveled in my blood-stained scrubs. "I don't understand why I'm here." Irina's expression remained professional. "Mr. Russo's guests don't require explanations." "I'm not a guest," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. I don't know what I am." Something like sympathy flickered across her face. "You're under Mr. Russo's protection now. That's all that matters." The foyer was cavernous, with a curved staircase and marble floors that amplified every footstep. Renaissance paintings hung on walls that stretched to cathedral ceilings. A crystal chandelier cast prismatic reflections across the space, morning light splintering into rainbows. Irina led me up the stairs and down a hallway lined with more artwork. I tried to memorize the turns, left, right, left again, but the house seemed designed to confuse. Finally, she stopped before a door at the end of a corridor. "Your suite," she announced, opening it with a keycard. The room beyond was larger than my entire apartment. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked gardens, and in the distance, the glittering city skyline. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, while a sitting area with plush armchairs occupied another. 2 doors presumably led to a closet and bathroom. "Everything has been prepared for you," Irina continued. "Fresh clothing in your size is in the wardrobe. Toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything, use the house phone to dial 0. I turned in a slow circle, trying to process the luxury surrounding me. "How long am I staying?" That's for Mr. Russo to decide. Her tone made it clear the subject wasn't open for discussion. The doctor will be here at noon to check your arm. Until then, rest. Breakfast will be brought up shortly. After she left, I stood frozen in the center of the room, my mind racing. What had Alexander meant about a promise to my mother? Why did he care about my broken arm? And what exactly had happened to my stepfather? The bathroom was a marvel of marble and glass, with a shower large enough for 4 people and a soaking tub beside a window with a view of the grounds. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself, pale, with shadows under my eyes and hair falling from its once neat bun. With some struggle, I managed to undress and shower with my cast protected by a plastic bag I found under the sink. The hot water felt heavenly against my skin, washing away hospital antiseptic and fear sweat. Wrapped in a plush robe, I explored the wardrobe and found it stocked with clothing in exactly my size. Jeans, sweaters, dresses, even sleepwear and undergarments still bearing price tags from expensive boutiques. The level of preparation was unsettling. This hadn't been arranged in the few hours since Alexander had met me at the hospital. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. A young woman entered with a breakfast tray, setting it on a small table by the window, before slipping out with a polite nod. The spread was impressive: fresh fruit, yogurt, pastries, and coffee. My stomach growled, reminding me how long it had been since I'd eaten properly. I settled into a chair and poured coffee with my good hand, savoring the rich aroma. As I ate, I tried to make sense of my situation. I was essentially a prisoner in this beautiful place, brought here by a man whose name was whispered with fear throughout the city. Yet I felt safer than I had in years. After breakfast, exhaustion overtook me. I curled up on the enormous bed, sinking into sheets softer than anything I'd ever felt. Despite my confusion and anxiety, sleep claimed me instantly. I dreamed of my mother, not sick and frail as she'd been at the end, but vibrant and laughing. In the dream, she was walking through this very house, her hand resting lightly on the banister as she descended the grand staircase. Someone called her name, but before she turned, I woke with a start. The bedside clock read 12:17 p.m. I'd slept for nearly 5 hours, yet it felt like only minutes had passed. A soft knock at the door announced the doctor, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes who examined my cast and changed my prescription pain medication. "The break is clean," she explained, reviewing my x-rays on a tablet. 6 weeks in the cast, then physical therapy. Mr. Russo has arranged for a specialist to visit 3 times weekly. "That's not necessary," I protested. "I can't afford. Everything has been taken care of," she interrupted gently. "Your only job is to heal." After she left, another meal arrived. A light lunch of soup and sandwiches. I was finishing when Irina returned, this time with clothing draped over her arm. "Mr. Russo requests your company for dinner," she announced. "These should fit." She laid out a simple but elegant navy blue dress and matching shoes with a low heel. "A car will collect you at 7. "I can't dine with him," I said, panic rising. "I barely know him." "And my arm? The dress has been specially altered for your cast," Irina pointed out. Indeed, the left sleeve was designed to accommodate my injury. "As for knowing him, that's precisely the purpose of dinner." Left alone again, I paced the room, feeling increasingly like a character in a Gothic novel, the innocent girl trapped in the mysterious mansion. Except Alexander Russo was no brooding Heathcliff or Rochester. He was something far more dangerous. At 6:30, another staff member arrived to help me dress and style my hair. The navy dress fit perfectly, the modified sleeve allowing my cast to remain comfortable. My hair was arranged in loose waves, and minimal makeup covered the shadows under my eyes. "Beautiful," the young woman murmured, stepping back to assess her work. I hardly recognized myself in the mirror. Gone was the exhausted nurse in blood-stained scrubs, replaced by someone who looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and power. Precisely at 7, Irina returned to escort me downstairs. We descended the grand staircase, my good hand trailing lightly on the banister just as my mother had in my dream. The coincidence sent a chill through me. Rather than the formal dining room I expected, Irina led me to a smaller, more intimate space with windows overlooking a lit garden. A table for 2 was set with crystal and silver, candles flickering between place settings. Alexander stood as I entered, and I was struck again by his presence. He changed into a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His customary guards were nowhere to be seen. "Mila," he said, his voice low and warm, "you look lovely." "Thank you," I replied automatically, years of conditioning making me polite despite my circumstances, though I still don't understand why I'm here. He pulled out my chair. "Sit. We'll talk over dinner." A server appeared with wine, pouring a small amount in Alexander's glass for approval before filling mine. Another brought appetizers, delicate arrangements of seafood that looked too beautiful to eat. "How's your arm?" Alexander asked after the servers departed. "Better with medication," I answered honestly. "The doctor you sent was very thorough." "Dr. Kessler is the best orthopedic specialist in the state." He took a sip of his wine, studying me over the rim of his glass. "She'll ensure you heal properly." I placed my napkin in my lap, trying to gather courage. "You said you made a promise to my mother. What did you mean?" Alexander seemed to consider his words carefully. "Your mother saved my life when I was 17. I had appendicitis that turned septic. She was my home nurse during recovery." This aligned with what I knew of my mother's career, though she'd never mentioned the Russo name. "That doesn't explain why you're helping me now, 20 years later." "We stayed in touch," he continued. "When she became ill, she reached out to me, asked for my help with medical bills. A flush of shame heated my cheeks. I'd worked 2 jobs trying to cover those expenses, never knowing my mother had sought outside assistance. She never told me." "She wouldn't have," Alexander said. "Julia was proud, but she was also practical. Before she died, she asked me to look after you, to make sure you were safe." My throat tightened with unshed tears. "Why wait 3 years? If you knew about my stepfather—" "I didn't," he interrupted, his expression darkening. "Your mother never mentioned any problems with him. After she passed, I had someone check on you occasionally. You seemed functional, working, independent. Until last night." The idea that I'd been watched for years without my knowledge was disturbing, but somehow less disturbing than what my life had become under my stepfather's roof. "What did you do to him?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since we left my house. Alexander's expression revealed nothing. "Let's just say Ray Donovan will be embarking on an extended journey of reflection, somewhere very distant, very isolated." A shiver ran down my spine. "You didn't kill him?" Alexander finished. "No, not yet. Death would be too merciful for what he did to you, to Julia's daughter." The casual way he discussed potential murder should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a shameful flicker of satisfaction, imagining my stepfather afraid, the way he'd made me afraid for years. "What happens now?" I asked, barely touching the exquisite food before me. "Now you recover. Here, where you're safe." He gestured to my full plate. "You should eat. You're too thin." I took a small bite, surprised by the explosion of flavors on my tongue. "I can't stay here indefinitely. I have a job, an apartment." "Your position at the hospital has been held for you with paid medical leave. As for your apartment, the lease has been terminated. Your belongings are being packed and brought here." The casual way he rearranged my life left me speechless. "You can't just—" "I can," he stated simply, "and I have." "What if I refuse? What if I want to leave?" Alexander's dark eyes held mine. "Are you asking if you're a prisoner, Mila?" I swallowed hard. "Am I?" "No. You're free to leave whenever you wish." His voice was soft, but carried an undercurrent of steel. "But I promised your mother I would protect you. I take my promises very seriously." The unspoken implication hung between us. I could leave, but Alexander Russo would still be watching, still controlling aspects of my life from a distance. The realization should have frightened me, but instead, it produced a strange sense of security I hadn't felt since my mother died. "There are clothes being made for you," he continued, changing the subject. "A seamstress will visit tomorrow for measurements." "The wardrobe is already full," I protested. "Those are temporary pieces," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "You need a proper collection." The conversation shifted to safer topics. books we'd both read, places we'd visited. Alexander was surprisingly well educated and articulate, discussing literature and art with genuine passion. By dessert, I found myself relaxing slightly, drawn in by his charisma despite my better judgment. Coffee was served in the adjacent sitting room, where a fire crackled in a stone hearth. I sank into a leather armchair, cradling my cup awkwardly with my good hand. "Your mother spoke of you often," Alexander said suddenly. "She was very proud of you, becoming a nurse." Following in her footsteps, the mention of my mother brought fresh grief. "I miss her every day, as do I," he said quietly. "She was special." Something in his tone made me look up sharply. The expression on his face was unguarded for once, a mix of admiration and old sorrow. "Were you and my mother—" I couldn't finish the question. Alexander's laugh was genuine but sad. "No, nothing like that. She was my friend." One of the few people who saw me as something more than a Russo. In that moment, he seemed almost human. Not the dangerous crime lord, but a man who had lost someone important to him. "It's getting late," he said, rising. "You should rest. Your body needs sleep to heal." I stood as well, suddenly aware of how tired I still was. "Thank you for dinner, and for everything else." He nodded once, then reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement as if approaching a skittish animal. His fingers brushed my cheek so lightly I might have imagined it. "Good night, Mila." As Irina escorted me back to my suite, I realized something that should have terrified me, but instead left me oddly calm. Alexander Russo, the most dangerous man in the city, had claimed me as his to protect, and God help anyone who tried to hurt me again. A week passed in a haze of pain medication, physical therapy, and luxury I could barely comprehend. Each morning I woke expecting to find myself back in my cramped apartment, the mansion just an elaborate dream, but each morning I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the distant sound of gardeners tending the expansive grounds. Alexander himself was like a ghost, always present in the house but rarely seen. Sometimes I caught glimpses of him crossing the foyer or speaking with his security team in hushed tones. Occasionally, I'd hear his voice down a hallway, giving precise instructions to staff members who listened with unwavering attention. By the 8th day, cabin fever had set in. Beautiful as my gilded cage was, it was still a cage. "I need to go outside," I told Irina when she brought my morning tea. "Just for a walk around the grounds." She assessed me with her usual impassive expression. "I'll arrange an escort." "I don't need a bodyguard to walk in the garden," I protested, but Irina had already left, the door closing softly behind her. Frustration bubbling, I dressed in jeans and a sweater that had been altered for my cast, then slipped into comfortable shoes. My arm ached less now, though the weight of the plaster was still awkward and cumbersome. A knock at the door announced my escort. Not one of Alexander's intimidating security team as I'd expected, but Alexander himself. "Good morning," he said, his gaze taking in my casual attire. "Irina mentioned you'd like a tour of the grounds." "You don't need to babysit me," I said, immediately regretting my sharp tone. "I mean, surely you have more important things to do." A hint of amusement crossed his face. "More important than keeping a promise? I don't think so." The autumn air was crisp as we stepped outside, leaves crunching beneath our feet. Alexander walked beside me, shortening his naturally long stride to match mine. 2 security guards followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give an illusion of privacy. "How are you settling in?" Alexander asked, guiding me along a stone path that wound through formal gardens now past their summer glory. "The accommodations are extravagant," I admitted. "But I feel useless. I'm a nurse. I should be working, not lounging around like some pampered pet." Alexander's expression darkened slightly. "You're not a pet, Mila. You're recovering from an injury. An injury that wouldn't prevent me from doing my job if I had proper accommodations," I countered. "I could handle paperwork or light duties." "Dr. Kessler recommended complete rest for 2 weeks," he reminded me. "One more week, then we can discuss your return to work." We reached a small pond where koi fish swam lazily beneath lily pads. A stone bench offered a view of the water and the colorful Japanese maples surrounding it. Alexander gestured for me to sit, This was my mother's favorite spot, he said, lowering himself beside me. She had the garden designed when I was a child. The personal revelation surprised me. Alexander rarely spoke about himself or his family. It's beautiful, I said truthfully. Peaceful. Peace is a rare commodity in my life, he replied, watching the fish circling in the clear water. I come here when I need to think. And what do you think about? I asked, genuinely curious. His dark eyes met mine. Lately? You. The simple admission sent a rush of heat to my cheeks. Me? Why? You're an enigma, Mila Bennett. Most people in your situation would be demanding compensation, asking for favors, trying to leverage their position. I'm not most people, I said. And what position? I'm here because you decided I should be. I didn't ask for any of this. Precisely, Alexander said, his voice softer than usual. You expect nothing. It's refreshing. A comfortable silence fell between us. In the distance, I could see the city skyline, a reminder of the world beyond these walls, a world where Alexander Russo was feared, not this almost gentle man sitting beside me. Tell me about your work at the hospital, he said suddenly. Your patients. The request caught me off guard, but I found myself talking about the children in the oncology ward, their courage in the face of illness, the small victories we celebrated together. Alexander listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a genuine interest. You love it, he observed when I finally fell silent. Being a nurse. It's all I've ever wanted to be, I confirmed. My mother inspired me, seeing how she helped people, how she made a difference. She made a difference to me, Alexander said, his gaze distant. Not just by saving my life, by seeing the person behind the name. Before I could respond, one of the security guards approached, speaking in a low voice to Alexander. His expression shifted instantly, the softness vanishing, replaced by the hard-edged authority I'd glimpsed before. I have business to attend to, he said, rising. Carlo will escort you back to the house when you're ready. He was gone before I could respond, striding purposefully toward the mansion, already on his phone. The security guard, Carlo, took up position a respectful distance away, giving me privacy while maintaining his watchful stance. I remained by the pond, trying to reconcile the different versions of Alexander Russo. The dangerous crime lord whispered about in the city, the attentive host who ensured my comfort. And now this man who spoke of my mother with such respect and sat quietly by a koi pond discussing my work with genuine interest. Later that afternoon, I was surprised by a delivery to my suite, a stack of medical journals and nursing publications, along with a note in bold, masculine handwriting. For your professional development during recovery. A. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me more than any of the expensive clothes or gourmet meals. He'd listened to me, understood what mattered. That evening, I was informed that Alexander had been called away on business. The news shouldn't have disappointed me, but it did. I'd grown accustomed to our brief interactions, passing each other in hallways, exchanging pleasantries over morning coffee when our schedules aligned. Without him, the mansion felt even more like a beautiful prison. 3 days later, I woke to commotion outside my door, voices in the hallway, footsteps moving quickly. I slipped on a robe and peered out cautiously. Irina spotted me and approached, her usual composure slightly rattled. Please return to your room, Miss Bennett. Everything is under control. What's happening? I asked, noticing security personnel moving with purpose through the corridor. Mr. Russo has returned, she said, as if that explained everything. He requires medical attention. My nursing instincts kicked in instantly. I can help. I'm trained for emergency care. Irina hesitated, then nodded sharply. Come with me, quickly. She led me to a part of the house I'd never seen before, what appeared to be Alexander's private quarters. The space was masculine and minimalist, with dark woods and leather furniture. A team of security stood outside a partially open door, through which I could hear low voices. He's in there, Irina said. The doctor is with him, but I pushed past her into what turned out to be a spacious bathroom. Alexander sat on the edge of a marble counter, shirt off, while a nervous-looking young man attempted to clean a wound on his shoulder. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage, and Alexander's face was pale beneath his usual tan. "What happened?" I asked, moving forward automatically. Alexander's eyes found mine, surprise briefly replacing the pain in his expression. "Mila, you shouldn't be here." "I'm a nurse," I reminded him, already assessing the situation. "And you need one." I turned to the young man. "Are you the doctor?" He nodded, clearly relieved to see me. "Dr. Parker, I'm more of a GP, not really trauma-trained." "Let me see," I said, gently moving his hands away from the wound. Alexander watched me, his breathing controlled but shallow. The injury was a deep gash across his shoulder and upper chest. Not a bullet wound as I'd feared, but a knife cut from the look of it, clean but deep. "This needs stitches," I said, professional mode fully engaged. "Proper cleaning, antibiotics?" "Just patch it up," Alexander ordered. "No hospitals." I fixed him with my best stern nurse look. "This isn't negotiable. Without proper treatment, you risk infection, significant scarring, possibly nerve damage." For a tense moment, we stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Do what you need to do. Here." "I'll need supplies," I told Dr. Parker, who seemed happy to defer to my expertise. He hurried off to gather what I requested, returning with an impressively well-stocked medical kit. "Everyone out," I ordered, washing my hands one-handed as best I could. "Except the doctor." Alexander dismissed his security team with a nod. They left reluctantly, closing the door behind them. "This will hurt," I warned him, preparing to clean the wound properly. His laugh was short and humorless. "I've had worse." As I worked, I tried to maintain professional detachment, but it was difficult with Alexander watching me so intensely. His body was a roadmap of past violence. Old scars crisscrossed his torso, telling stories I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. "How did this happen?" I asked, carefully irrigating the wound. "Business disagreement," he replied, not flinching, despite what must have been significant pain. "Must have been quite a disagreement," I murmured, preparing the local anesthetic. "The other party came away with a more permanent reminder of our differences," he said, his tone casual but chilling. I paused, needle in hand. "Did you kill someone tonight, Alexander?" His dark eyes met mine, unflinching. "Would it change how you treat my wound if I had?" "No," I admitted. "The Hippocratic Oath doesn't have exceptions." "Then perhaps it's better you don't know the details of my business," he suggested. "For both our sakes." I proceeded with the stitches, working methodically despite the awkwardness of using my non-dominant hand with my other arm still in its cast. Dr. Parker assisted silently, handing me instruments and supplies as needed. "You're good at this," Alexander commented as I tied off the last suture. "I had an excellent teacher," I replied, thinking of my mother. "She always said healing was an art as much as a science." "Julia was wise," he agreed softly. When I finished, Alexander insisted Dr. Parker leave us. The young doctor seemed relieved to be dismissed, gathering his belongings quickly and slipping out. Alexander remained on the counter, watching me clean up. "Thank you." "Just doing my job," I said, suddenly aware of our proximity, of his state of undress. "You should rest. Let your body heal." "Is that your professional opinion?" he asked, a hint of his usual confidence returning. "It is." I started to turn away, but he caught my wrist gently. "Mila," he said, his voice lower, "why did you help me? You could have stayed in your room, let the doctor handle it." The question surprised me. "Because you were hurt. Because I can help people who are hurt. It's what I do." "Even people like me?" he pressed. I met his gaze steadily. "What kind of person are you, Alexander?" Instead of answering, he released my wrist and reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The gentle gesture contrasted sharply with the violence etched into his skin. "You should get some sleep," he said finally. "It's late." I nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "Try not to get stabbed again. Your body needs time to recover before the next business disagreement." A genuine smile curved his lips. "I'll do my best." As I turned to leave, he called my name once more. I paused at the door, looking back. "When you said you felt useless here," he said, "you were wrong. You just proved that. The next morning, a package waited outside my door. A custom-made sling for my cast in soft blue leather, far more comfortable than the hospital-issued one I'd been using. The note attached read simply, "An apology for disturbing your sleep. A." Days passed, and Alexander's wound healed without complication. He resumed his normal routine, but something had shifted between us. Our interactions became more frequent, our conversations longer. He began joining me for meals regularly, not just formal dinners, but casual breakfasts where he'd read the newspaper while I worked through the medical journals he'd provided. 2 weeks after my arrival at the mansion, Alexander entered the library where I'd been reading and placed a small box on the table beside me. "What's this?" I asked, marking my place in the book. "Open it and see," he replied, taking the seat opposite me. Inside the box was a hospital ID badge, my badge, but with a new designation. Pediatric Oncology Department Head? I read in disbelief. "This must be a mistake." "No mistake," Alexander said. "The position opened last week. Your name came highly recommended by the hospital board." I stared at him. "The board you happen to have significant influence over?" He didn't deny it. "You're qualified, Mila. Your supervisor said as much during your last performance review. This just expedited the process. I can't accept a position I didn't earn," I protested. "You did earn it," he countered. "You've put in the work, shown your dedication. Consider it a long overdue recognition of your skills." I turned the badge over in my hand, torn between indignation at his high-handedness and excitement at the opportunity. "When would I start?" "Next week, if Dr. Kessler approves. Light administrative duties until your cast comes off." He studied me closely. "Does this please you?" The question was genuine, I realized. He wanted to make me happy, in his own controlling way. "Yes," I admitted. "But next time, ask me before rearranging my career." A smile tugged at his lips. "Noted." Later that evening, as we walked through the gardens that had become our nightly ritual, Alexander seemed preoccupied. The security team kept a greater distance than usual, giving us a rare moment of true privacy. "Your stepfather has been asking about you," he said suddenly, his tone carefully neutral. I stumbled slightly, caught off guard. "I thought he was away." "He is. Very far away. But he's been making inquiries through various channels, trying to determine your whereabouts." Alexander's expression hardened. "He seems concerned about your well-being, or concerned about what I might say about him," I countered, wrapping my arms around myself despite the mild evening. Alexander stopped walking, turning to face me. "Has he always been abusive, since your mother was alive?" I shook my head. "No. He was different then. Or maybe he was just better at hiding it. After she died, it started small, criticism, controlling behavior. Then it escalated." "Why didn't you leave?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Where would I go?" I replied simply. "I had medical school debt, barely enough income to cover rent." He made sure I knew I couldn't survive without him. I laughed bitterly. The irony is, he was right. I didn't escape on my own. You had to rescue me. Alexander's expression softened. "You would have found your way eventually. You're stronger than you realize." The compliment warmed me unexpectedly. "What will happen to him? My stepfather?" "That depends," Alexander said carefully, "on what you want." The implication was clear. With a word from me, Ray Donovan would disappear permanently. The power was dizzying and terrifying. "I don't want his blood on my hands," I said quietly. Alexander nodded, unsurprised. "Then he'll remain where he is, isolated, monitored, never able to hurt you again." "Thank you," I whispered. We resumed walking, the silence between us comfortable now. When we reached the koi pond, Alexander gestured for me to sit on our usual bench. "I have to leave town for a few days," he said. "Business in Chicago." My stomach clenched with an unexpected anxiety. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning." He studied my reaction. "The house will remain at your disposal. Security will be doubled in my absence. Is that necessary?" I asked. "I mean, no one knows I'm here, do they?" Alexander's expression turned grave. "Your stepfather isn't the only one making inquiries. Word has spread that you're under my protection. That makes you interesting to certain people. Interesting how? I pressed. Potentially valuable, he said bluntly. As leverage. I digested this information, so I'm not just a promise to my mother anymore. I'm a liability to you. No, Alexander said firmly. You're important to me. That's different. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. Alexander, I'll be back on Friday, he continued, standing abruptly. If you need anything, Irina has direct access to me at all times. That night I couldn't sleep. The revelation that I might be in danger simply by association with Alexander was troubling, but not as troubling as my reaction to his absence. 3 weeks ago, I'd never met the man. Now, the thought of him leaving for just a few days left me anxious and unsettled. What was happening to me was this Stockholm syndrome, developing feelings for my captor. But Alexander wasn't exactly holding me captive, was he? He'd said I could leave whenever I wanted. Yet where would I go? Back to an empty apartment? Back to a life where I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid my stepfather would return? Here, I was safe, protected, valued even. The realization hit me with startling clarity. I didn't want to leave, not just because of the luxury or the safety, but because of Alexander himself. Somewhere between that first terrifying car ride and tonight's walk in the garden, I'd begun to care for him, this complex, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who had upended my life completely. And that scared me more than any threat from the outside world ever could. Alexander's absence left a vacuum in the mansion. Though he'd only been gone for 2 days, the house felt different. Still running with military precision under Irina's watchful eye, but lacking the electric energy that seemed to radiate from its owner. I'd begun limited work duties, reviewing patient files sent from the hospital and participating in video conferences with the oncology team. The mental stimulation was welcome after weeks of relative inactivity. But I found myself distracted, glancing at my phone more often than necessary, wondering if Alexander would call. He didn't, though Irina assured me he was fine when I casually inquired. Mr. Russo is very busy in Chicago, she said, her knowing look suggesting my interest hadn't been as casual as I'd hoped. On Thursday afternoon, I was working in the library when Carlo appeared at the door. Miss Bennett, there's someone here to see you. My pulse quickened. Mr. Russo is back early? No, miss. A woman. Says she's a friend from the hospital. Confusion and wariness mingled as I followed Carlo to the foyer. Standing there, looking profoundly out of place among the marble and antiques, was Lily, the night nurse who had been on duty when I'd broken my arm. Mila, she exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me. Thank God you're okay. I returned her hug awkwardly with my good arm. Lily, what are you doing here? She pulled back, examining me with concerned eyes. Everyone's been worried sick. You disappeared from the ER, then your apartment was emptied and no one could reach you. I've been asking around for weeks. The security team watched our interaction with thinly veiled suspicion. I turned to Carlo. It's okay. She's my friend. He nodded, but didn't move from his position by the door. How did you find me? I asked, leading Lily to a small sitting room off the main foyer. It wasn't easy, she admitted, still glancing nervously at the security guards. I heard rumors you'd been seen with Alexander Russo the night you disappeared. Then yesterday, the hospital announced you'd been promoted to department head. Her eyes widened. Mila, what's going on? Are you in trouble? Is he forcing you to stay here? I almost laughed at the absurdity and accuracy of her concern. It's complicated, Lily, but I'm safe. I promise. Alexander is helping me. Helping you? She echoed incredulously. Mila, do you know who he is? What he does? I know enough, I said quietly. Lily lowered her voice to a whisper. People are talking. They say you're his mistress. Heat flooded my cheeks. That's not true. Then what are you doing here? She pressed. In this house? Wearing clothes like that? She gestured to my designer outfit. Alexander knew my mother, I explained, offering the simplest version of the truth. He's protecting me. From Ray. Understanding dawned in Lily's expression. Your stepfather. The one who hurt you. She'd been one of the few people at the hospital who had suspected the truth about my injuries over the years. I nodded. He can't hurt me anymore. Lily looked around the opulent room, taking in the obvious wealth. And what does Russo want in return for his protection? Nothing, I said, though the word felt hollow. There was always a price for everything, wasn't there? I just hadn't figured out what Alexander's was yet. Nobody does something for nothing, Mila, Lily said, echoing my thoughts. Especially not men like him. Before I could respond, Irina appeared in the doorway. Miss Bennett, a call for you. Urgent. I excused myself, following Irina to the study where a secure phone awaited. Alexander's voice came through, tense and clipped. Who is visiting you? The question took me aback. Lily Thompson. She's a nurse from the hospital. How did you— Security protocols, he interrupted. Anyone entering the property is photographed and the image sent to me immediately. You're spying on me? I asked, indignation rising. I'm protecting you, he corrected. Is she trustworthy? Yes, I said firmly. She's my friend. A pause then. Keep your visit brief. I'll be home tonight. The line went dead. When I returned to Lily, she was standing by the window, arms crossed defensively. Was that him? Yes, I admitted. He's concerned about security. He's controlling you, she countered. Monitoring your visitors, keeping you isolated. Mila, this isn't healthy. It's temporary, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Until I'm fully recovered. Until it's safe. Lily took my hand. I'm worried about you. You've escaped one controlling man only to fall under the influence of another. Her words hit home with uncomfortable accuracy. It's different, I insisted. Alexander doesn't hurt me. There are many ways to control someone besides physical violence, she said gently. I've seen it before in the ER, women trapped in gilded cages, convinced they're there by choice. I pulled my hand away, suddenly defensive. I appreciate your concern, Lily, but I know what I'm doing. She sighed, reaching into her bag for a small notebook. She scribbled something and tore out the page. My new address and private number. If you ever need help, day or night, no questions asked. I took the paper, touched by her concern despite my irritation. Thank you, but I'm really okay. Lily left shortly after, escorted by Carlo to the gate. I watched from the window as her modest sedan disappeared down the long driveway, taking with it my connection to my old life. Her visit had unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Was she right? Had I simply exchanged one form of captivity for another, more comfortable version? I spent the afternoon distracted, her words echoing in my mind as I tried to focus on patient files. By evening, restlessness drove me to the gardens, seeking peace by the koi pond. The sun was setting, painting the sky in dramatic oranges and purples, when I heard footsteps on the path behind me. I knew without turning who it was. The confident stride, the subtle shift in the air that always seemed to accompany his presence. You're back early, I said, still gazing at the water. Alexander settled beside me on the bench. Business concluded sooner than expected. I glanced at him, noting the tension in his jaw, the subtle shadows beneath his eyes. Successful business? Very, he replied, loosening his tie. How was your visit with Nurse Thompson? The question had an edge to it that irritated me. Pleasant. She was worried about me, with good reason, Alexander said. Your disappearance must have seemed suspicious. She thinks I've exchanged one abuser for another, I stated bluntly, watching for his reaction. Alexander's expression hardened. Is that what you think? I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was just a nurse with a broken arm and a miserable home life. Now I'm living in a mansion, surrounded by security, promoted to a position I'm not sure I earned, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. And this troubles you? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Yes, I said honestly, because I don't understand why. Why me? Why go to all this trouble? A promise to my mother doesn't explain. This, I gestured between us. Alexander was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkening garden. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. Your mother saved more than my life, Mila. She saved my humanity. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I was raised to be exactly what I am. My father's son, heir to his empire. There was never any question of what I would become. I listened, afraid to interrupt this rare moment of openness. When I was 17, after the appendicitis, Julia came to care for me. For 6 weeks, she was in our home every day, and she treated me like a normal boy, not a Russo, not a future crime lord, just Alexander. His expression softened at the memory. She brought me books, talked to me about my future as if I had choices, asked what I wanted when no one had ever considered my wants before. That sounds like her, I murmured, my throat tight with emotion. When she left, I was different. I still became what I was always meant to be, he continued. But I never forgot those conversations, the way she saw me. He turned to face me fully. You have her eyes, her compassion. When you treated my wound, you didn't see Alexander Russo, the man people fear. You just saw someone who needed help. The revelation stunned me. So this, all of this, is because I remind you of my mother? No, he said firmly. It started as a promise, yes, but it's become something else entirely. What has it become, Alexander? I asked, my heart beating faster. Instead of answering, he reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek with a tenderness that made my breath catch. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Power, money, protection, favors. You're the first person since your mother who expects nothing. That's not entirely true, I admitted. I do want something from you. His expression grew guarded. What? The truth, I said simply. About what happens next. About what you want from me. Alexander's dark eyes held mine, intense and unreadable. What I want, he began, then stopped, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. What I want is for you to stay, not as a guest, not as an obligation, but because you choose to. The admission hung between us, heavy with implications, and if I choose to leave, then I would let you go, he said, though the tension in his jaw suggested it would cost him. But I would still ensure your safety, your comfort, from a distance. Why? I pressed, needing to hear him say it. Alexander took my hand, his touch gentle but possessive. Because you've become essential to me, Mila. In ways I never anticipated. The confession, coming from a man who had likely never admitted vulnerability to anyone, moved something deep within me. Before I could respond, his phone rang. Alexander checked it, his expression instantly shifting to one of cold fury. I need to take this, he said, standing. We'll continue our conversation later. I watched him stride away, already speaking rapidly into the phone, his voice too low for me to catch the words. The security team fell in behind him, leaving me alone by the pond. By the time I returned to the house, Alexander had locked himself in his study with Carlo and several other men I recognized as his lieutenants. Raised voices occasionally filtered through the heavy door, though the words remained indistinct. Irina intercepted me in the hallway. Mr. Russo asks that you remain in your suite for the rest of the evening, Miss Bennett. Dinner will be brought to you. Is something wrong? I asked, concerned by the unusual request. Security precaution, she replied, her expression giving nothing away. Nothing for you to worry about. But there was plenty to worry about, I discovered, when I turned on the television in my sitting room. Breaking news banners flashed across the screen. Attempted hit on crime family leader. 3 dead in downtown shootout. The reporter stood in front of a cordoned-off restaurant, police lights flashing behind her. Sources say Alexander Russo, alleged head of the city's most powerful crime syndicate, was the target of the attack that left 3 dead and 2 injured. Russo himself appears to have escaped unharmed. Police are investigating possible connections to the Varga family, longtime rivals of the Russo organization. I sank onto the sofa, my legs suddenly weak. Alexander hadn't mentioned any attack. He'd said business concluded, successfully. Was this what he considered a success? Surviving an attempt on his life? The reality of who he was came crashing down on me with renewed clarity. This man who spoke so tenderly about my mother, who touched my cheek with such gentleness, was also a man whose business dealings ended in bloodshed. A man with enemies who wanted him dead. And now I was connected to him, Protected by him, yes, but also potentially a target because of that very protection. When dinner arrived, I couldn't eat. I paced the suite, torn between the growing feelings I couldn't deny and the harsh reality of Alexander's world. Lily's warnings echoed in my mind, alongside Alexander's confession by the pond. A soft knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Alexander standing there, his expression inscrutable. "May I come in?" he asked, unusually formal. I stepped aside, noting how exhausted he looked up close. His tie was gone, shirt collar open, revealing the edge of the scar where I'd stitched his wound. "You're all over the news," I said, closing the door behind him. "There was an attack." "Yes," he confirmed, moving to the window to gaze out at the moonlit gardens. "An unfortunate business complication." "3 people are dead, Alexander," I said quietly. "That's more than a complication." He turned to face me, his expression hardening slightly. "This is my world, Mila. I've never pretended otherwise." "No, you haven't," I admitted. "But I don't think I fully understood what it meant until now." "And now that you do?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath the question. I approached him slowly. "Now I understand why you keep asking what I want, instead of telling me what you want. You're used to taking. Used to people giving you what you desire out of fear or obligation." Alexander remained still as I stopped before him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "But you don't want that from me," I continued softly. "You want me to choose you, freely." Something shifted in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that I had understood so clearly. "Yes," he acknowledged. "I want your choice to be real." I reached up, my fingertips lightly tracing the scar visible at his collar. "Even if I choose wrong, even if I choose a man whose business leaves bodies in the street." His hand caught mine, holding it against his chest where I could feel his heart beating steadily. "Even then, though I would do everything in my power to keep that part of my life separate from you." "Could you?" I asked. "Tonight's news suggests otherwise." "What happened today was an anomaly," he said firmly, "a miscalculation that won't be repeated." I studied his face, searching for the truth. The attack was because of me, wasn't it? Someone found out about me, about what I mean to you. Alexander's silence was confirmation enough. "How did they know?" I pressed. "I've barely left the property. Your friend," he said finally. "Nurse Thompson. She was followed after leaving here, questioned." Horror washed over me. "Is she—" "She's unharmed," he assured me quickly. "But she revealed enough for the Vargas to make certain assumptions about your importance." Guilt and fear twisted in my stomach. "I put her in danger. I put us both in danger." "No," Alexander said firmly, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. "This is not your fault. The responsibility is mine for not anticipating the risk." His expression softened. "But it clarifies things, doesn't it? Shows you exactly what being in my life means." I pulled away slightly, needing space to think. "When you said you would let me go if I chose to leave, did you mean it?" Pain flickered across his features, but he nodded. "Yes. Your safety would be arranged differently, but yes, I would respect your decision." The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. Alexander Russo, the man who controlled everything and everyone around him, was giving me the one thing no one ever had. A genuine choice. "I need time," I said finally. "To think, to be sure." He stepped back, respecting my space even as disappointment shadowed his eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Whatever you decide, Mila, know that my promise to protect you stands. It always will." After he left, I sat by the window for hours, watching the moonlight on the gardens, weighing impossibilities against each other, safety versus freedom, protection versus independence. The undeniable connection I felt to Alexander versus the dangerous reality of his world. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Dawn found me already dressed, my few personal possessions packed in the duffel bag Alexander had brought from my old apartment that first night. I'd slept little, my mind churning with possibilities, consequences, futures branching like lightning in a storm cloud. When Irina brought my usual morning tea, she paused at the sight of my packed bag. "You're leaving," she stated, no question in her tone. "I need to speak with Alexander," I replied, neither confirming nor denying. Her normally impassive face softened almost imperceptibly. "He's in the study. Has been all night." I nodded my thanks, taking a final look around the suite that had been my sanctuary these past weeks. Then, gathering my courage, I made my way through the mansion's winding corridors to Alexander's study. The door was ajar, and through the opening I could see him at his desk, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. Files and laptops were spread across the surface before him, evidence of a sleepless night. Despite his disheveled appearance, shirt creased, hair mussed from running his hands through it, he still radiated power and control. He glanced up, spotting me in the doorway, and immediately ended his call. "Entrate," he said, gesturing me inside. I stepped into the room, suddenly uncertain how to begin. His gaze dropped to the bag in my hand, and something shuddered in his expression. "You've made your decision," he said, rising from his chair. "Yes." I set the bag down, needing both hands free for what came next. "I'm leaving." Alexander nodded once, his jaw tight. "I understand. Carla will drive you wherever you wish to go. Your apartment has been maintained in your absence, though security upgrades were installed. The lease is paid through the year." The businesslike tone, the immediate practicality of his response, caught me off guard. "You're not going to try to change my mind?" "I gave you my word," he replied simply. "Your choice is yours alone." I moved closer, studying the face that had become so familiar to me. "And if my choice is to leave, but not to go far?" Confusion flickered across his features. "I don't understand. I can't stay here, Alexander, not as a guest. Not as someone you're protecting because of a promise to my mother." I took a deep breath. "But I could stay as something else." Hope and wariness battled in his expression. "What are you saying, Mila?" "I'm saying I want my own place, my own life, my job at the hospital." I stepped closer still, until I could feel the heat of him. "And I want you. But I need to know it's my choice, not just something I fell into because you rescued me." Alexander remained perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter this fragile moment. "And how would this work? In practical terms, I live in my own apartment, work my shifts, build my career." I reached up, my hand resting lightly against his chest. "And when I choose to, I come to you, or you come to me, but as equals, not as protector and protected." "Equals," he repeated, his voice low. "You know that's not how the world sees us, how it ever will." "I don't care how the world sees us," I countered. "I care how we see each other." His hand covered mine where it rested against his heart. "And how do you see me, Mila?" "I see a man divided," I said honestly, "capable of great tenderness and terrible violence. A man shaped by his name and his legacy, but fighting to be more than those things." I met his gaze directly. "I see you, Alexander. All of you. And I'm still here." Something broke open in his expression. Vulnerability I'd only glimpsed before. "And what of the danger? After yesterday?" "I'm not naive," I interrupted. "Being with you comes with risks, but so does crossing the street. So does living with a man like Ray." I squeezed his hand. "At least with you, the danger is honest. Named." Alexander's free hand came up to cup my face, his touch gentle as a whisper. "You continue to surprise me," he murmured. "Most people run from the truth of who I am." "I'm not most people," I reminded him. "No," he agreed, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "You never have been." For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, the air between us charged with possibility. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head and kissed me. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, so at odds with the powerful man I knew him to be. But as I responded, sliding my good arm around his neck, the kiss deepened, years of restraint giving way to something primal and consuming. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the night I found you at the hospital. That long?" I asked, surprised. "Longer," he admitted. "Since I saw your picture in your mother's locket years ago." At my startled look, he explained. She always wore it. Showed me once, so proud of her daughter, the nursing student. The revelation that Alexander had known of me long before we met should have been unsettling. Instead, it felt like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. The strange sense of familiarity I'd felt with him from the beginning, the way he'd seemed to know me better than a stranger should. "What now?" I asked, still held loosely in his arms. "Now," he said thoughtfully, "we find you an apartment. Something secure but independent. Close to both the hospital and here." "I can find my own place," I protested mildly. A hint of his usual authority returned. "Security considerations, Mila. Non-negotiable. But you'll make the final choice among suitable options." I nodded, accepting the compromise. "And my job?" "The promotion stands," he said firmly. "It was always meant for you, just accelerated by recent events." Your supervisor confirmed as much. "And us?" I asked, the most important question of all. Alexander's expression softened. "Us is whatever you want it to be, whatever pace you choose. I've waited this long for you. I can be patient a while longer." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. My cast came off, revealing an arm weak from disuse, but healing well. I found an apartment, a beautiful top-floor unit in a secure building halfway between the hospital and Alexander's estate. As promised, he had presented me with options but let me make the final choice. I resumed my duties at the hospital, now as department head, a position that brought new challenges and responsibilities I found I genuinely enjoyed. My colleagues were curious about my sudden promotion and mysterious absence, but I offered only vague explanations about medical leave and recovery. Lily watched me with wary eyes at first, concerned by my continued association with Alexander, despite my newfound independence. But as weeks passed, and she saw me thriving, confident, happy, uncontrolled, her worries gradually eased. "Just be careful," she cautioned over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "Men like him don't change who they are." "I don't want him to change who he is," I replied truthfully. "I just want to be with him as myself, not as someone he saved, and I was being myself, more fully than perhaps I ever had before. Free from my stepfather's oppressive presence, from the constant fear that had shadowed me for years, I found myself blooming, becoming more assertive at work, making decisions with confidence, rebuilding friendships that had withered under Ray's isolating influence. Alexander and I developed a rhythm. Some nights he would come to my apartment, arriving with no security visible, though I knew they were never far, bringing dinner or simply himself. Other evenings I would go to the mansion, now as a guest rather than an inhabitant. We talked for hours, about books, about my patients, about his more legitimate business interests, rarely about his other activities, though neither of us pretended they didn't exist. The physical aspect of our relationship developed slowly, at my pace as he had promised. Alexander was patient, gentle, never pushing beyond what I was ready for. When we finally came together, it was with an intensity that left us both shaken, years of tension and restraint giving way to something profound and transformative. Afterwards, lying in the tangle of sheets in my apartment, his arm draped protectively across my waist, I asked the question that had lingered since the beginning. What really happened to my stepfather? Alexander tensed slightly beside me, then relaxed. "Are you sure you want to know?" "Yes," I said. "No more secrets between us." He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin. "He's alive, as I promised. Working on an oil platform in the North Sea. Very isolated, very cold, very far from you." "How did you arrange that?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Your stepfather had outstanding gambling debts to several unsavory individuals," Alexander explained. "I paid those debts in exchange for his immediate departure, and a binding agreement never to return or contact you. And if he breaks that agreement," I pressed. Alexander's voice cooled. "Then our arrangement would need to be renegotiated. In person." The implication was clear, but I found I couldn't summon any sympathy for Ray. Not after years of abuse, of fear, of walking on eggshells in my own home. "Thank you," I said simply. For keeping your word. For letting him live. Alexander propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me with serious eyes. I will always keep my word to you, Mila. Always. 3 months after I'd left the mansion, Alexander asked me to accompany him to a charity gala, our first public appearance as a couple. The event, benefiting the children's hospital where I worked, would put us squarely in the spotlight. Are you sure? I asked, as we discussed it over dinner at the mansion. Won't this make me more of a target? You're already known to be important to me, Alexander replied. Hiding you away won't change that. Better to be open, to show strength. He took my hand across the table, but only if you're comfortable. I considered it carefully. Public association with Alexander Russo would change how people saw me. Colleagues, patients, friends. But hiding our relationship felt dishonest, as if I were ashamed of him. Yes, I decided. I'll go. The night of the gala, Alexander sent a dress, a deep blue silk creation that fit perfectly, making me look elegant without being ostentatious. When he arrived to collect me, he wore a tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding presence. You're beautiful, he said, his eyes warming as they took me in. So are you, I replied, adjusting his bow tie slightly. His smile was wry. I've been called many things, but beautiful is a first. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the city's oldest hotel. As we entered, a subtle hush fell over the nearby guests, heads turning, whispers following in our wake. Alexander's hand rested lightly at the small of my back, a gentle but clear statement of possession. Hospital administrators greeted me warmly, though I noted the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes when Alexander was introduced. My colleagues were more openly curious, some boldly assessing the man whose name inspired such fear and respect throughout the city. Dr. Phillips, I greeted my former supervisor, now my colleague. You remember Alexander Russo? The older man nodded, extending a hand that barely trembled. Of course. Mr. Russo has been very generous to the pediatric oncology department. The work you do is important, Alexander replied smoothly. Mila speaks highly of your leadership. As the evening progressed, I was struck by Alexander's social grace. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, charming donors, engaging in conversation with hospital board members, always keeping me at his side, but never overshadowing me. This was yet another facet of him. The public figure, the businessman, separate from both the tender lover I knew in private and the dangerous crime lord others feared. During dinner, I noticed a man watching us from across the room, distinguished, silver-haired, with cold eyes that never left Alexander. When our gazes met, he raised his glass slightly, a gesture that seemed more challenge than toast. Who is that? I asked quietly. Alexander didn't need to look up to know who I meant. Victor Varga, my chief business rival. The name sent a chill through me. The Varga family, mentioned in the news reports about the attack on Alexander months earlier. Should I be concerned? I asked, keeping my voice steady. No, Alexander replied with calm certainty. Not here. Not now. His hand covered mine on the table, visible to anyone watching. And never again. If I have anything to say about it, later, as we danced, I felt Victor Varga's eyes following us across the floor. He's still watching, I murmured. Alexander drew me closer, his lips brushing my ear. Let him watch. Let everyone watch. Let them see exactly what they would be risking if they ever tried to reach me through you. There was possession in his voice, yes, but also something deeper. A vulnerability I'd come to recognize in the months we'd been together. Alexander Russo, who controlled vast criminal enterprises with ruthless efficiency, had given me power over him that no enemy could ever match. We both knew it, though neither of us spoke of it aloud. As the evening drew to a close, Alexander was pulled aside by a hospital board member, leaving me momentarily alone by the champagne fountain. I was reaching for a glass when a voice spoke from behind me. So, you're the nurse who tamed the beast. I turned to find Victor Varga standing there, impeccably dressed, a cold smile on his face. Mr. Varga, I acknowledged, my pulse quickening. I don't believe we've been introduced. No need for formalities, he replied smoothly. I feel I know you already, Miss Bennet. You've become quite the topic of conversation in certain circles. I kept my expression neutral, channeling Alexander's calm authority. Have I? Indeed. The woman who holds Alexander Rousseau's heart. If such a thing exists. Varga sipped his champagne. A valuable position. Potentially dangerous, of course. Is that a threat, Mr. Varga? I asked directly. He chuckled, seemingly amused by my boldness. Merely an observation. Rousseau has many enemies. I'm aware, I replied coolly. Yet here you are, he mused. Either very brave or perhaps I simply know something you don't, I countered. Curiosity flickered in his cold eyes. And what might that be? That there's more to Alexander Rousseau than most people see. I met his gaze steadily, including you. Before he could respond, I felt a presence at my side. Alexander, his expression pleasant, but his eyes hard as he looked at Varga. Victor, he greeted with deceptive mildness. Introducing yourself to Mila. How considerate. The tension between the two men was palpable. Years of enmity compressed into the small space between them. Just welcoming her to our little community, Varga replied. She's quite remarkable. I can see why you're attached. Alexander's hand settled at my waist, both protective and possessive. Indeed. If you'll excuse us, our car is waiting. As we walked away, I could feel Varga's eyes boring into my back. He was threatening me, I said quietly once we were out of earshot. Testing boundaries, Alexander corrected, assessing weaknesses, and, I pressed. A smile touched his lips, and finding none. You handled him perfectly. In the car, safely enclosed in tinted privacy, I asked the question that had been forming all evening. Will it always be like this? Rivals watching? Waiting for an opportunity? Alexander considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. My world is what it is, Mila. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. I'm not asking for pretense, I said. Just truth. He took my hand, his thumb stroking my palm. The truth is, yes, there will always be threats. But also, yes, I will always protect what's mine. He looked into my eyes. And you are mine, as I am yours. A dangerous truth, perhaps, but truth nonetheless. Instead of fear, his words filled me with a strange certainty. I had chosen this. Chosen him. With clear eyes and full understanding of who he was and what his world entailed. Not as a captive, not as someone he'd rescued, but as an equal partner who had weighed the risks against the depth of what we shared and found the balance worth the danger. 6 months to the day after Alexander had found me at the hospital, we stood in the garden by the koi pond, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. My life had transformed completely. New apartment, new position at the hospital, new relationship that defied all conventional wisdom. Any regrets? Alexander asked, his arm around my waist as we watched the koi swim lazy circles. I considered the question honestly. No, I answered finally. This path wasn't one I could have imagined. But it's mine. I chose it. I chose you. He turned me to face him, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. I have something for you. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. My heart stuttered in my chest as he opened it, revealing not a ring as I'd half expected, but a delicate gold locket. It was your mother's, he explained as I touched it with trembling fingers. She left it with me before she died. Asked me to give it to you when the time was right. Tears pricked behind my eyes as Alexander fastened the chain around my neck. The locket rested against my skin, warm and somehow familiar. Open it, he urged gently. Inside was a tiny photograph. My mother, smiling, healthy, as I remembered her before illness took her. And opposite, where my picture had once been, was a new photo. Alexander and me, captured during a quiet moment in the garden weeks earlier, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. She would have approved, Alexander said softly, of us. How can you be sure? I asked, closing the locket gently. Because she knew me at my worst, and still saw something worth saving, he replied, just as you do. As night fell around us, the garden lights illuminating our path back to the house, I thought about choices, mine, my mother's, Alexander's. the complex web of decisions and consequences that had brought us to this moment. My stepfather had once told me, in a rare moment of alcohol-induced honesty, that life was a series of cages. You never truly escaped, just traded one for another. Perhaps he was right. But some cages were of our own making. Doors left deliberately unlocked, some captivities were chosen, entered with eyes wide open, hearts fully engaged. Alexander's fingers interlaced with mine as we walked, his stride matching mine, no longer ahead or behind, but beside me. The future stretched before us, uncertain and dangerous, but also filled with possibility. I had traded safety for love, predictability for passion, conformity for complexity, and I wouldn't have it any other way.